Amara stood still at the edge of the harbor, watching her father count the coins in his hand. Next to him, the merchant lifted a big sack of sugar onto his shoulder, sugar that seemed to be worth more than his own daughter, Petit 17. Amara had just been traded away to work in a wealthy Charleston household, all for a bag of imported sugar and a handful of silver. "You can't do this," she cried, but her father wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's done," he mumbled, pocketing the coins. "The arrangement is for 5 years. You'll have food and shelter, more than I can provide." The merchant, a round man with small, darting eyes, grabbed her arm. "Come along now. Mrs. Blackwell doesn't like to be kept waiting." Amara's chest tightened as her father turned away without a goodbye. Her little brothers watched wide-eyed from behind a stack of crates. This was 1835, and a poor girl had few options in the world. "I have papers for you to sign," the merchant said, pulling her toward a waiting carriage. "I can't write," Amara lied. It was her first act of rebellion, hiding her ability to read and write, skills her mother had secretly taught her before consumption took her 3 winters ago. The merchant snorted. "Just make your mark then. X will do." As the carriage rattled through Charleston streets, Amara pressed her face against the window. Grand homes with white columns lined the avenues, a world away from the cramped quarters she'd shared with her family near the docks. How could her father have traded her away so easily? And for what? Sugar for his rum? The Blackwell estate stood like a gleaming palace at the end of a long, oak-lined drive. Servants scurried about the grounds like ants around a hill. Amara's stomach clenched. This was to be her prison for the next 5 years. "Remember your place," the merchant warned as they approached. "Mrs. Blackwell is one of Charleston's most important women. Her husband owns half the shipping in the harbor." Mrs. Blackwell was waiting in the foyer, a tall, severe woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She circled Amara like a vulture inspecting its next meal. "Hands," she commanded. Amara held them out, trying to stop their trembling. "At least they're clean. Can you sew?" "Yes, ma'am." "Cook?" "Some, ma'am." Mrs. Blackwell narrowed her eyes. "You'll start in the laundry. One mistake, and you'll wish you'd never come here." Little did she know, Amara was already wishing exactly that. That night, lying on a thin mattress in the servants' quarters, Amara silently wept. But beneath her tears, something else stirred: determination. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Your mind is the one thing they can never take from you." And Amara had a remarkable mind. While the other servants slept, she pulled out a small journal she'd managed to hide in her clothing, her most precious possession, and began to write. Not just about her sorrows, but about everything she observed. The household routines, the conversations between the wealthy visitors, the business matters discussed over dinner. Knowledge was power, and Amara was gathering it piece by piece. What she didn't know was that in the master's study downstairs, Mr. Blackwell was frantically searching for the missing ledger, the one that contained all his business secrets, including the names of those who helped him smuggle contraband past customs. The very ledger that had accidentally been mixed in with the laundry Amara would be sorting tomorrow morning. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. Amara's fingers trembled as she stared at the leather-bound book buried among the linens. The Blackwell family crest was stamped in gold on its cover. She knew immediately she shouldn't be seeing this. "What's that you've got there?" Martha, the head laundress, called from across the room. Amara quickly shoved the ledger under a pile of sheets. "Nothing, ma'am. Just sorting as instructed." When Martha turned away, Amara slipped the book into her apron pocket. That night, by candlelight, she cracked open the forbidden pages. Numbers, names, dates, shipments. At first glance, it looked like ordinary business records. But as Amara read further, patterns emerged. Certain shipments marked with a red star arrived at odd hours, with payments far exceeding their listed cargo value. Ships docking without proper customs inspection. Officials' names with amounts listed beside them. "This is smuggling," she whispered to herself. For 3 nights, Amara meticulously copied the contents into her journal, her hand cramping as she worked through the darkness. On the 4th morning, Mr. Blackwell announced that anyone found with his missing ledger would be immediately turned over to the authorities. "Return anonymously," And no questions will be asked, he promised, his face flushed with barely contained panic. That afternoon, Amara slipped the ledger under his study door while delivering fresh linens. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. 6 months passed. Amara moved from the laundry to kitchen work, then to serving at dinner parties. The wealthy guests never really looked at her. She was furniture to them, invisible. But Amara was far from blind. She listened to their careless conversations, noted which ship captains were in financial trouble, which merchants were expanding, which goods were scarce. "Girl, more wine," Mrs. Blackwell snapped one evening as Charleston's elite discussed the cotton market. "The price will double by spring," a red-faced banker declared confidently. "I'd stake my reputation on it." Amara filed the information away, adding it to her mental ledger. That night, she approached Martha with an unusual request. "Ma'am, instead of my monthly wage, might I take payment in cotton thread instead?" Martha frowned. "Whatever for? I can sew fine lace in my spare time," Amara explained. "Perhaps sell it for extra money to send home." Martha reluctantly agreed. What she didn't know was that Amara had no intention of making lace. The cotton would sit untouched until spring when its value doubled. It was a small beginning, but it was something, a tiny seed of independence planted in secret. Then came a night that changed everything. Mr. Blackwell's son Thomas returned from university up north, bringing with him progressive ideas and a startling kindness that confused Amara. Unlike the others, he looked servants in the eye when he spoke to them. "You there," he said, catching Amara reading in the garden during her rare free hour. "What are you reading?" She quickly hid her book. "Nothing, sir. I was just—" "No, please." His voice was gentle. "I'm curious." Reluctantly, she showed him. It was a discarded mathematics textbook she'd rescued from the trash after Thomas's younger brother had finished with his tutor. Thomas's eyebrows shot up. "You understand this?" "Some parts, sir." He studied her for a long moment. "Can you meet me here tomorrow?" "Same time." The next day, Thomas brought her more books, not just mathematics, but economics, philosophy, literature. It became their secret routine. For an hour each week, he would teach her what he'd learned at university. "Why are you doing this?" Amara finally asked one day. Thomas hesitated. "Because education shouldn't be a privilege of birth," he said. "And because I've seen how you observe everything. You have a mind for business, better than mine, I suspect." What Thomas didn't know was that Amara had already begun putting her knowledge to use. The cotton thread investment had tripled her savings. She convinced the cook to let her sell excess kitchen herbs at the market, splitting the profits. Small ventures, carefully hidden. Then disaster struck. Mrs. Blackwell caught them in the garden, Thomas explaining a complex economic theory with Amara actively debating his points. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her face white with fury. Before Thomas could answer, Amara heard the words that would haunt her dreams. "Pack your things. You leave this house tonight." Rain lashed against Amara as she huddled in a Charleston alleyway, her meager possessions bundled in a cloth. Mrs. Blackwell had thrown her out with nothing but the clothes on her back. Only Martha's secret kindness, slipping Amara her saved wages and her precious journal, had given her anything at all. "You've ruined everything," Mrs. Blackwell had hissed. "Thomas is to marry the Harrington girl next spring. Do you think his future would survive the scandal of being caught with you?" Amara hadn't been allowed to say goodbye. Thomas would never know what happened to her. But as dawn broke over the harbor, Amara made herself a promise she would not break. The Blackwells had taught her more than they realized, about business, about power, and about the value of being underestimated. She found work at the docks, using a skill no one knew she possessed: numbers. The dock manager needed someone to tally cargo, and Amara stepped forward. "You," he laughed. "A girl." "Test me," she challenged. Reluctantly, he did. Amara calculated faster than he could verify, leaving him speechless. "Where did you learn this?" "My mother taught me," she lied, protecting Thomas. For 3 years, Amara worked tirelessly, saving every penny. She rented a tiny room near the harbor and continued her education by candlelight, buying discarded books from ship crews. Most importantly, she watched the patterns of trade, which ships brought what goods, which captains could be trusted, which merchants were desperate for quick sales. Then came her opportunity. A shipment of damaged textiles, soaked by seawater during a storm, was being sold for pennies on the dollar. The merchant couldn't find a buyer. "No one wants waterlogged fabric," he complained. "I'll take it," Amara said, counting out almost all her savings. People thought she was mad. What they didn't know was that Amara had discovered something while working in the Blackwell laundry. Saltwater stains could be removed with the right treatment of lye soap and vinegar, followed by careful dyeing. Working through the night in a rented shed, Amara salvaged the fabric. Within a week, she'd sold it to dressmakers across Charleston for 5 times what she'd paid. Her first real profit. She didn't stop there. Amara began specializing in damaged goods that others overlooked. Dented tea canisters that could be reshaped, cracked pottery that could be repaired, out-of-fashion items that could be reworked. Charleston's merchants began to know her as the woman who could turn trash into treasure. By 1841, Amara had saved enough to rent a small storefront. Second chance goods, she called it. The sign painter raised his eyebrows when she said she wanted a Montgomery proprietor below the name. "A woman running a business?" he asked skeptically. "Just paint the sign," Amara replied steadily. The store struggled at first. Men refused to do business with her. Women of means thought it improper to enter her establishment. But Amara adapted. She hired a man, old Jim, a former sailor with honest eyes, to be her representative when needed. Behind the scenes, it was always Amara making the decisions. Then came the day that changed everything. A ship captain approached her store, desperate. His cargo of sugar, ironically, the very commodity she'd been traded for, was about to be seized for unpaid harbor fees. "I need $300 by tomorrow noon," he pleaded. Amara looked at him carefully. "Your ship and cargo are worth 10 times that. Why not get a loan from the bank?" "The banks won't touch me. I've had difficulties with the Blackwell Shipping Company." At the mention of that name, Amara's heart quickened. "I'll buy your cargo outright. 2/3 the market value, in cash today." The captain hesitated, then nodded grimly. That night, Amara sat surrounded by account books, calculating her risk. This was everything she had saved. If it failed, she would lose it all. But if it succeeded? The next day, merchants across Charleston received identical messages. Quality sugar, 20% below market. One day only. Cash purchases. A. Montgomery, proprietor. By sunset, Amara had doubled her investment. Word spread quickly about the mysterious A. Montgomery, who seemed to have an uncanny sense for business opportunities. What no one realized was how Amara had gained this knowledge. From years of being invisible in the corners of Charleston's wealthiest homes, listening to careless conversations never meant for servants' ears. As her business grew, so did her confidence. Amara began acquiring small properties around the harbor, a warehouse here, a shop there. She hired women like herself, those society had discarded or dismissed, and taught them to read, write, and calculate. Then came the devastating news. Thomas Blackwell was dead, thrown from his horse during a storm. The funeral procession passed directly in front of her store. From behind her curtained window, Amara watched Mrs. Blackwell's carriage roll by. For the first time in years, their eyes met. The older woman's expression changed from confusion to shock as recognition dawned. What Amara didn't know was that Thomas had left a will with a mysterious bequest. "To the woman who taught me the true meaning of intellect, whose name I cannot write here for her own protection. My shares in the West Indies Trading Company." The Blackwells had no idea what it meant. But a letter would arrive at Amara's door the next morning that would change everything. The lawyer who appeared at Amara's door looked as uncomfortable as a cat in water. "Miss Montgomery? I represent the estate of Thomas Blackwell." Amara's hands trembled as she read the letter. Thomas had never forgotten her. Before his death, he had discovered through shipping records that A. Montgomery was the same Amara he had once taught in the garden. His gift, 15% ownership in the West Indies Trading Company, was worth more than all her current holdings combined. There must be some mistake, Mrs. Blackwell had apparently argued when the will was read. My son would never give valuable shares to a shopkeeper. But Thomas had been thorough, leaving a sealed letter explaining exactly why Amara deserved this inheritance. She has the most brilliant mind for business I have ever encountered. I only gave her books. She gave herself an education that would shame most university men. The Blackwells contested the will, of course, but Thomas had made it legally unassailable. Standing in her small office, Amara made a decision. She would not hide anymore. "Please inform the board that I will be attending the next shareholders' meeting," she told the lawyer. In person, the boardroom fell silent when Amara walked in. 7 men in expensive suits stared as if she'd grown a second head. "Gentlemen," she said, taking her seat at the massive oak table, "I believe we have business to discuss." "This is preposterous," Mr. Blackwell sputtered, his face flushing dark red. "A woman has no place in business matters." Amara smiled coolly. "Yet here I sit, holding 15% of your company. Shall we review last quarter's shipping manifests? I notice our sugar imports from Barbados have fallen while costs have risen. I wonder why." The room went deadly quiet. Amara knew exactly why, because she'd spent years studying the patterns of trade, watching as the Blackwells mismanaged their West Indies routes. "Perhaps," she continued, "you'd like to explain the discrepancy between the cargo listed on the manifests and what actually arrives at the docks. My sources tell me it's nearly 20%. Mr. Blackwell's face drained of color. He knew exactly what she was implying, that she had evidence of their smuggling, tax evasion, and bribery of customs officials. "You can't possibly understand," he began. "I understand perfectly," Amara cut in. "I understand that this company is 3 months from bankruptcy unless dramatic changes are made." The other board members exchanged nervous glances. These are news to them. "Gentlemen," Amara said, opening her leather portfolio, "I've prepared an analysis of our current position and a strategy for recovery. You may review it at your leisure." For the next hour, Amara outlined her plan, renegotiating contracts with West Indies suppliers, establishing new trade routes to Brazil, modernizing their fleet. Her knowledge was so comprehensive, so detailed, that even Mr. Blackwell fell silent. When she finished, the oldest board member, a white-haired banker named Harrington, leaned forward. "Where did you study business, Miss Montgomery?" Amara met his eyes. "In the Blackwell household, sir. As a servant who was traded for a bag of sugar." The gasps around the table were audible. Mr. Blackwell looked as though he might collapse. "Your son Thomas," she continued, looking directly at the elder Blackwell, "saw value in me that you never did. You taught me to read economics texts while I polished your silver. Now I own ships that carry more cargo than you ever dreamed possible." The truth hit the room like a thunderclap. The invisible girl they had dismissed had become the business mind they now needed to survive. 6 months later, the West Indies Trading Company was flourishing under Amara's guidance. She had transformed it from a struggling enterprise into the most innovative shipping company on the eastern seaboard. Her methods were revolutionary. She established fair trade practices with suppliers, hired women as clerks and accountants, and even offered former slaves positions throughout the company. "You'll ruin us with these radical ideas," Mr. Blackwell had predicted. Instead, profits doubled. By 1845, Amara had leveraged her success to create something entirely new: Montgomery Mercantile Bank, the first in Charleston to offer loans to women business owners. The elite who had once dismissed her now sought her advice on investments. 10 years after being thrown into the streets, Amara stood on the balcony of her Charlestown mansion. Coincidentally, the former Blackwell estate, purchased when Mr. Blackwell finally went bankrupt from his own mismanagement of the family's remaining assets. As she watched ships bearing her company's flag enter the harbor, a carriage pulled up to her gate. It was Mrs. Blackwell, now widowed and impoverished after her husband's death. "I've come to ask for a position," the older woman said stiffly when Amara received her in the very parlor where she had once served tea as a maid. "I have nowhere else to go." Amara studied the woman who had once cast her out like garbage. The tables had completely turned. "There's an opening in the laundry," Amara said finally. "The work is hard but honest." Mrs. Blackwell's eyes widened in horror. Amara then smiled, not unkindly. "Or perhaps you prefer to manage our new charity school for girls." Thomas would have wanted his mother to be part of educating the next generation of women who will change the world. As Mrs. Blackwell broke down in tears of relief and shame, Amara gazed out at the harbor bustling with her ships. The girl who had been traded for sugar had built an empire sweeter than anyone could have imagined. In the years that followed, Amara Montgomery became known as the Lady of Charleston Commerce. Her story, from servant to shipping magnate, became legend. But few knew the most precious secret. In her desk drawer, she kept a small bag of sugar crystals, a reminder of where she began and how far she had come. Never underestimate someone you've undervalued became her life's motto. They may just build an empire while you're not looking.